A tariff is a tax placed on imported goods, and it's one of the oldest tools governments use to influence trade. By making foreign products more expensive, tariffs are meant to protect local industries and jobs, while also generating revenue for the government. But the story doesn't end there. Tariffs can have ripple effects that reach far beyond the port or the factory floor. When tariffs are imposed, the price difference between domestic and imported goods grows. This encourages shoppers to choose locally made products, which can boost demand for homegrown businesses and support local employment. But it also means that consumers may have fewer choices, and sometimes they end up paying more for everyday items. Take cars, for example. If the US decides to slap a tariff on Canadian vehicles, the sticker price for those cars goes up in American showrooms. This makes American-made cars more attractive, giving local automakers a competitive advantage. However, it also means that anyone shopping for a new car might face higher prices, regardless of where the car was made. While tariffs can shield certain industries from foreign competition, they often create challenges for others. American manufacturers who rely on imported steel, for instance, suddenly face higher costs for their raw materials. This can squeeze profit margins, slow down production, or even force companies to look for cheaper alternatives elsewhere. These increased costs don't just stay in the boardroom, they usually get passed on to consumers. As a result, shoppers may notice price hikes on everything from cars and appliances to groceries and electronics. Over time, these higher prices can add up, straining household budgets and changing spending habits. Tariffs can also trigger a chain reaction on the world stage. Countries targeted by tariffs often retaliate by imposing their own, leading to tit-for-tat trade wars. These disputes can disrupt global supply chains, slow economic growth, and create uncertainty for businesses and workers on both sides of the border. For businesses and workers, the impact of tariffs can be dramatic. Some companies may thrive as competition decreases, while others struggle to cope with rising costs or shrinking markets. For many, tariffs can mean the difference between expanding operations and facing layoffs or closures. For everyday people, the effects are often felt at home. Higher prices at the checkout, fewer job opportunities, and even shortages of certain products can all be traced back to trade disputes. Families may have to make tough choices about what to buy, and workers may worry about the security of their jobs. Historically, the US and Canada have enjoyed a close trading relationship, with most goods moving freely across the border. This open trade has helped both economies grow, creating jobs and lowering prices for consumers on both sides. But in 2025, this partnership faces its most serious challenge in decades. New tariffs threaten to disrupt the flow of goods, unsettle markets, and test the resilience of businesses and families alike. The stakes are high, and the outcome is uncertain. As tensions rise, the world watches closely. The stage is set for a major showdown between two of the world's closest trading partners, with consequences that could ripple far beyond their borders. In 2025, a major trade dispute erupts between the US and Canada, sending shockwaves through both nations and the global economy. What began as a disagreement over tariffs and market access quickly escalates into a full-blown standoff, with both sides digging in their heels. The world watches as two of the largest trading partners on the planet find themselves at odds, threatening decades of economic cooperation and cross-border trust. The dispute threatens the very foundation of North American commerce, putting billions of dollars in trade and millions of jobs at risk. Ports slow down, border crossings become tense, and uncertainty ripples through every sector, from agriculture to technology. President Trump, determined to secure what he calls a fair deal, sets an August 1st deadline for a new trade agreement. He warns that if no compromise is reached, a sweeping 35% tariff will be imposed on all Canadian goods entering the US, a move that would upend established supply chains and consumer prices overnight. The US has already imposed steep tariffs on a range of Canadian products, sending a clear message that it's willing to play hardball to protect its interests. A 50% tariff now burdens Canadian steel and aluminum, industries that have long been tightly integrated with American manufacturers. Meanwhile, Canadian-made cars face a 25% tariff, threatening the auto sector on both sides of the border, and putting thousands of jobs in jeopardy. Canada, whose economy relies on the US for 75% of its exports, faces severe consequences if the tariffs take effect. The stakes are enormous, with small businesses, farmers, and major corporations all feeling the pressure. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government is locked in urgent round-the-clock negotiations, scrambling to find common ground and avoid an economic disaster that could ripple far beyond Canada's borders. For the US, the standoff is about rebalancing trade, protecting domestic jobs, and asserting economic power. American workers and industries demand action, fearing the loss of livelihoods to foreign competition. For Canada, it's about economic survival, national pride, and maintaining access to its most important market. The uncertainty leaves communities and businesses on edge, unsure of what the future holds. As the deadline nears, both nations brace for either a last-minute breakthrough or a damaging trade war that could reshape the economic landscape of North America for years to come. President Trump's trade philosophy is simple: I'm a tariff person. He sees tariffs as a direct way to protect American industries and force trading partners to the negotiating table. Since returning to office, Trump has made tariffs central to his agenda, targeting sectors like steel, aluminum, and autos. The threat of a 35% tariff on Canadian goods is meant to pressure Canada into concessions. Supporters say this approach defends American jobs. Critics warn it risks supply chains and raises costs for U.S. consumers. Despite warnings, Trump remains committed to using tariffs as leverage. The message free trade is out, America first is in. Prime Minister Mark Carney projects strength, vowing not to accept a bad deal under U.S. pressure. He rallies Canadians around economic sovereignty, insisting any agreement must serve national interests. This public defiance unites the country and strengthens his negotiating hand. Privately, Carney's team acknowledges that some tariffs are now inevitable. The goal is to limit their scope and avoid the devastating 35% blanket tariff. Carney must balance public resolve with pragmatic compromise, seeking targeted tariffs over sweeping ones. It's a delicate act: defend national pride while facing harsh economic realities. The outcome will shape Canada's economic future for years to come. Negotiations in Washington are tense and urgent, with both sides racing against the August 1st deadline. Canada's top negotiators, Dominic LeBlanc and Kirsten Hillman, work to soften U.S. demands and prevent economic chaos. Canada has paused retaliatory tariffs and dropped its digital services tax to show goodwill. Still, the U.S. insists on broad tariffs, while Canada pushes for reductions, especially on steel, aluminum, and autos. The uncertainty over Trump's endgame adds to the tension. Failure to reach a deal would trigger the 35% tariff, devastating Canadian industries and jobs. The U.S. would also feel pain: higher costs for manufacturers and lost access to the Canadian market. Both sides have much to lose, making compromise essential. The clock is ticking and the stakes couldn't be higher. The U.S. and Canada share one of the world's most integrated economic relationships, with over $750 billion in annual trade. Cross-border supply chains are deeply intertwined, especially in autos, energy, and agriculture. A single car part may cross the border multiple times before final assembly. Tariffs disrupt this system, raising costs and creating inefficiencies. Canada depends on the U.S. for 75% of its exports, everything from lumber and metals to oil and gas. The U.S. in turn relies on Canada for raw materials and as a major export market. Disruptions hurt both sides. American industries face shortages and higher prices, while Canadian prosperity is threatened. A trade war would ripple through both economies, affecting millions. The stakes are continental, not just national. Business leaders and economists warn that tariffs threaten North America's tightly woven supply chains. Companies built on seamless cross-border trade now face higher costs and operational chaos. Small businesses are especially vulnerable, with some losing access to key markets overnight. Tariffs drive up prices for manufacturers, who pass those costs to consumers. Americans could soon pay more for cars, appliances, and groceries. Inflation risks rise, potentially leading to higher interest rates and slower economic growth. What starts as a policy to protect jobs can backfire, raising costs and hurting families. The economic fallout could be widespread and unpredictable. For families and workers, the trade dispute is more than just a headline. It's personal. It affects the stability of jobs, the security of paychecks, and the prices of everyday essentials. When two major economies like the US and Canada clash, the ripple effects are felt in every household and workplace, from the factory floor to the family dinner table. A 35% tariff could mean layoffs in Canadian factory towns, forcing families to tighten their belts, and lost markets for American farmers, leaving crops unsold and futures uncertain. Communities that rely on cross-border trade could see businesses shutter and local economies stall. Everyday costs rise. Groceries, cars, and home projects all get pricier. Even small increases at the checkout add up, straining family budgets and making it harder for people to plan for the future. The impact is felt not just in big purchases, but in the little things that make up daily life. As the deadline looms, 3 scenarios emerge: a last-minute deal with limited tariffs, an extension for more talks, or a collapse into a full trade war. Each path carries its own risks and uncertainties, and negotiators are under immense pressure to find common ground before time runs out. The best hope is a compromise that avoids the worst economic pain, though some level of protectionism is now inevitable. A balanced agreement could preserve jobs, stabilize prices, and keep trade flowing, even if it means some tough concessions on both sides. An extended standoff prolongs uncertainty, hurting business confidence and making it difficult for companies to invest or hire. The longer the dispute drags on, the more anxiety grows among workers, business owners, and investors alike. A trade war would trigger job losses, higher prices, and strain the US-Canada alliance. It could also spark protests, disrupt travel and supply chains, and deepen divisions between neighbors who have long relied on each other for prosperity. The decisions made now will shape North America's economy and daily life for years to come. Families, workers, and businesses will all feel the consequences, whether the outcome is cooperation or conflict. The world is watching as 2 close allies face a defining moment. The choices made in the coming days will not only determine the future of US-Canada relations, but also set an example for how nations navigate economic challenges in an interconnected world.